They all saw her as a nobody. Just a quiet data clerk with a delicate dragonfly tattoo, completely out of place on a high-threat base. They laughed until the most decorated SEAL on base saw it, and his salute silenced the entire room. The air at Firebase Chimera tasted of rust and baked earth. Perched on the jagged edge of a forgotten desert in a hostile nation, it was less a base and more a raw, exposed nerve. Humvees, coated in a permanent film of ochre dust, sat like slumbering beasts. Marines, their faces etched with grit and exhaustion, moved with the sharp, aggressive energy of men who lived on the brink. And through it all, a ghost drifted. Her name was Anya Petrova, 30 years old, with pale, watchful eyes and hair the color of straw, pulled back into a severe bun. She was the data analyst for the logistics division. In a world of hardened muscle and booming voices, she was a whisperer. Her uniform was always immaculate, her reports flawless, her voice a low, steady murmur that never rose in anger or excitement. She was a creature of quiet efficiency, the kind of soldier you looked through, not at, except for one detail. Just above the cuff of her right sleeve, peeking out when she reached for a file or lifted her coffee mug, was the delicate, intricate ink of a dragonfly. Its wings were a latticework of impossibly fine lines, its body a sliver of shadow. On this desolate outpost, a place of brutal functionality, the tattoo was an anomaly, a splash of artistry in a monochrome world. To the operators and infantrymen, it was a joke. Check out the dragonfly on the data clerk. A young corporal snickered in the chow line, his voice loud enough to carry. Gonna sting the enemy with its feelings? A wave of rough laughter followed. Anya, standing a few feet away, gave no sign she'd heard. Her shoulders didn't tense. Her expression remained a placid mask. She collected her tray, found her usual solitary table in the corner, and faced the wall. This was her routine. She was a phantom, a necessary but invisible cog in the war machine. Liked well enough by the quartermasters who valued her precision, she was utterly ignored by the Tier 1 teams who passed through Chimera for resupply. Green Berets, MARSOC Raiders, Navy SEALs, they were gods here, and she was just part of the scenery. They'd requisition gear through her department, their eyes sweeping past her as if she were a piece of furniture. The base functioned on a clear, unspoken hierarchy of lethality. At the top were the operators, men who carried the weight of unseen wars in their scars and their silence. At the bottom were the support staff, the clerks, the mechanics, the people who kept the gears turning. And Anya, with her quiet demeanor and her ridiculous tattoo, was firmly at the bottom. She was an object of mild amusement, a harmless eccentricity in a deadly serious place. That was, until a convoy of matte black, unmarked trucks rolled through the main gate on a Tuesday afternoon, bringing with them a silence that felt heavier than any sound. 6 men disembarked. They were walking shadows, clad in sterile, high-tech gear, their faces obscured by beards and the kind of profound weariness that only comes from staring into the abyss. They moved with a predatory grace that made the air crackle. Tier 1, the elite of the elite. Their leader, a man whose file was likely more redacted than a state secret, strode into the supply depot. Anya was at the main counter, finalizing an inventory checklist on her datapad. The lead SEAL, a young, cocky operator with a glint of arrogance in his eyes, stopped in front of her. He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on the dragonfly tattoo. "You're the logistics clerk?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'm the data analyst of record for this requisition," Anya replied, her voice flat, her eyes never leaving his. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Didn't ask for your job title, sweetheart. Just the gear." He leaned against the counter, deliberately invading her space. One of his teammates chuckled. "Dragonfly. Cute. My kid's sister has one of those." Anya ignored the jibe. She tapped a final confirmation on her datapad, and a small robotic lift whirred to life behind her, presenting a sealed, steel-plated crate. Her posture was ramrod straight, her expression unreadable. She was a fortress of calm in a sea of testosterone. But then, the last man from the convoy entered the depot. He was older, with streaks of silver at his temples and eyes like chips of glacial ice. The rank insignia on his collar was subdued, almost hidden, but the authority he radiated was absolute. He was Commander Thorne, a living legend in the SEAL teams, a man whose name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones. He wasn't looking at the crate. He wasn't looking at his men. His gaze was fixed on Anya, or more specifically, on the dragonfly tattoo just visible on her wrist. The room, which had been buzzing with low chatter and the clank of gear, fell utterly silent. Commander Thorne's entire body went rigid. He blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion, as if rebooting his understanding of the world. Then, with a precision that was almost painful to watch, he straightened his back, brought his heels together, and raised his hand in a sharp, formal salute. The other SEALs stared, their jaws slack. The young operator who had mocked Anya looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "Sir," one of them stammered, confused. Thorne didn't lower his hand. He didn't break his gaze from Anya. For a long, stretched-out moment, Anya hesitated, a flicker of something. Annoyance? Regret? Crossing her features. Then, she mirrored his action, returning the salute with equal, chilling precision. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" Thorne asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was somehow more commanding than a shout. Anya gave a curt nod. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she was meant to hear, but in the dead silence of the room, the words carried like a shockwave. "Operation Nightfall," he breathed. "I thought you were all gone." Every man in the depot froze. The air turned to ice. The dragonfly on her wrist was no longer a pretty picture. It was a key, a symbol, a ghost from a mission so secret it didn't officially exist. A mission that had gone dark 3 years ago, leaving 17 operators listed as unaccounted for. They were all presumed dead. Anya Petrova was supposed to be one of them. The commander's salute didn't quell the whispers. It ignited a firestorm. The story of the Tier 1 legend saluting the quiet data clerk spread through Firebase Chimera like a contagion. But without context, it became just another piece of baffling gossip, and for some, an affront. The hierarchy had been violated, and the system needed to correct itself. The next morning, the backlash began. Someone had managed to snap a blurry photo of Anya's tattoo, print it out, and tape it to the entrance of the mess hall. Scrawled across it in thick, red marker was a single word, wannabe. As Anya walked in for breakfast at 0500 sharp, a group of infantrymen near the door erupted in performative laughter, ensuring she heard. She didn't react. Her stride didn't falter. Her expression didn't change. She got her standard black coffee and oatmeal and sat at her usual table, alone, facing the wall. The isolation was a shield she had long since perfected. But the silence was shattered when 2 officers entered, Lieutenant Graves and Major Thorne. No relation to the SEAL commander, but a man who shared his name and none of his gravitas. Major Thorne was a career soldier, known for his rigid adherence to protocol and his open contempt for anyone he deemed unworthy of their uniform. They saw the picture, and a shared smirk passed between them. "Looks like her tattoo has more combat experience than she does," Graves said, just loud enough for the entire dining hall to hear. A fresh burst of laughter echoed off the concrete walls. Anya slowly placed her spoon down. Her shoulders seemed to relax, but her hands, resting on the table, were perfectly still. Major Thorne approached her table, his presence casting a shadow over her. He tapped the laminated photo with a thick finger. "This you?" he demanded, his voice booming with authority. Anya didn't look up. He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You think putting a little ink on your skin makes you one of them? Makes you a ghost? You're wearing a history you never earned, private." Still, she said nothing. Her silence seemed to infuriate him more. Graves leaned in, his tone mockingly conspiratorial. "Let me guess, your boyfriend was a SEAL? Or did you just see the design in a magazine?" That was the line. Anya looked up. Her pale eyes were clear, steady, and utterly devoid of fear. They locked onto Graves, then shifted to Thorne. "No," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an impossible weight. "But my CO wore it on his helmet the day we breached the Kasanov facility. I was the 6 o'clock on his entry team." The mess hall went dead silent. The phrase 6 o'clock wasn't common slang. It was specific tactical jargon for the rear guard on a breach, the most vulnerable and critical position. Major Thorne froze, his face paling slightly. What did you say?" Anya stood up slowly, her back perfectly straight, her breakfast untouched. "You've had your fun," she said, her voice now as cold and sharp as a shard of glass. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with someone who actually understands what this emblem means." And for the first time since her arrival at Firebase Chimera, she didn't retreat to the shadows. She marched directly down the center of the mess hall. Every fork was suspended in midair. Every eye was on her. She didn't stop until she reached the heavy steel door marked Base Command. She knocked once, a sharp, decisive rap. A crisp, no-nonsense female voice called from within. "Enter." Colonel Eva Rostova did not look like the commander of a forward operating base in one of the world's most dangerous regions. With sharp, intelligent features and silver haircut in a severe, practical style, she looked more like a university professor. But the Silver Star and Legion of Merit ribbons on her chest told a different story. She was a legend in military intelligence, a woman who had clawed her way to the top in a man's world. She looked up from her desk as Anya entered, her expression a mixture of curiosity and impatience. "Private Petrova," Anya said, her voice formal. "Requesting permission to clarify my service record, ma'am." Rostova's eyes narrowed slightly. The whole base was buzzing about the salute, and now the source of the disruption was standing in her office. "The floor is yours, Private. This had better be good." Anya reached into a small, secured pocket on the inside of her uniform jacket. She withdrew a single, folded sheet of paper. It was made of a strange, polymer-like material, worn and creased from years of being hidden. She laid it on the polished surface of Rostova's desk. It was stamped with classification markings Rostova had only seen in theoretical briefings, markings that denoted a level of secrecy far beyond top secret. Hesitantly, she unfolded it. The first line read, "Project NYX, Asset Profile." Below it, most of the text was redacted with solid black bars, but a few lines were visible. Operative Designation, Echo 7. Role, Deep Cover Infiltration / Countersurveillance. Commanding Authority, Joint Special Operations Command, Subdirectorate Sigma. Colonel Rostova's breath hitched. She had heard whispers of Sigma, a ghost program that answered to no one but a select few at the Pentagon. It was a myth, a boogeyman used to scare junior intelligence officers. This can't be real," Rostova whispered, looking from the document to Anya. Anya leaned forward slightly. "I was attached to SEAL Team 9 for Operation Nightfall under SOC's Deep Vector Initiative. I was the last asset out of the target zone when the mission was compromised." The ink, she pulled back her sleeve, revealing the full dragonfly tattoo, is the NYX sigil. It's a marker. Only survivors of compromised deep cover ops are authorized to wear it. There were only 2 of us. Rostova stared at the dragonfly. It wasn't just a picture. Woven into its wings, almost invisible to the naked eye, were a series of coordinates and a micro-digital signature. It was a key and a tombstone all in one. Slowly, Colonel Rostova stood up. She walked around her desk, stood directly in front of Anya, and rendered a salute as sharp and respectful as the one Commander Thorne had given. Through the open doorway, several staff officers in the outer office stopped dead in their tracks, watching in stunned disbelief. A full-bird colonel saluting a private. Anya returned it crisply. Just then, Major Thorne appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with indignation. "Colonel, I must formally object to this charade. This private is making a mockery of—" "Major, shut your mouth and get in here," Rostova snapped, her voice like cracking ice. Thorne stumbled in, his tirade cut short. Rostova pointed a trembling finger at Anya's arm. "Do you know what the NYX sigil is, Major?" "It's a tattoo, Colonel." "It's a memorial," Rostova corrected, her voice dangerously low. It's awarded to operatives who have been so deep undercover that their official records have been permanently erased. They are, for all intents and purposes, dead. It means the person wearing it has survived a mission that officially never happened and has lost everyone they served with. You didn't just mock a soldier, Major. You desecrated a monument. Thorne's face went from red to a pasty white. He looked at Anya, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not a clerk, but something terrifying. Anya turned and walked out of the office, leaving a silence so profound it felt like an explosion. When she re-entered the mess hall, Thorne and Graves were standing stiffly at attention by the coffee machine, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated dread. Someone had already torn her picture from the wall. The revelation didn't just spread, it detonated. The name Project Nix and the term Echo 7 became the new currency of gossip, whispered in hushed tones in maintenance bays and bunkhouses. Anya Petrova was no longer a joke. She was an enigma, a living ghost story. The soldiers who once laughed at her now gave her a wide berth, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. She ignored it all, returning to her duties at the logistics depot as if nothing had changed. She still processed requisitions, still updated inventory logs. Her focus is absolute as ever. She wasn't interested in their apologies or their respect. She was there to do a job, but the quiet wouldn't last. The ripples of her revelation had traveled far beyond the wire fences of Firebay's Chimera. The next morning, the distinct, thumping roar of a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter tore through the sky. It wasn't a supply transport or a medical evac. This was a VIP bird. It landed in a swirl of dust and rotor wash, and before the welcome detail could even assemble, a 3-star general descended the steps. General Miles Corbin, a man who had overseen some of the most critical operations in the last decade. He bypassed the waiting base command, his expression grim, and made a beeline for Colonel Rostova's office. 5 minutes later, Anya was summoned. She entered the room to find a tension so thick it felt like a physical weight. General Corbin stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned and studied her, his eyes sharp and analytical, stripping away layers, searching for the truth. "You're Petrova?" he asked, his voice a low baritone. "Yes, General." He held up a digital copy of her Nix file on a datapad. "Do you have any idea what kind of chaos this document causes when it surfaces?" "I do, sir." "Then you also know that you were never supposed to reveal its existence," he pressed. "I didn't," Anya stated calmly. "They mocked the sigil. I was publicly challenged by a superior officer. I followed protocol by reporting to my CEO to verify my status." Rostova interjected. She was cornered. "General, the failure was ours, not hers." Corbin let out a long, slow breath and set the datapad down. He walked over to Anya, his demeanor softening almost imperceptibly. "Commander Thorne trusted you," he said softly. "He signed your Nix authorization himself, the night before the Kasanov breach. He said if anyone could make it out, it was Echo 7. He paused, his gaze intense. "You saved 2 of my best men that night, Petrova. Dragged them 3 clicks under heavy fire to the exfil point. That makes this personal." Anya simply nodded, her expression unchanging. The general turned to Rostova. "She stays. Full access reinstated. And you will make it known, in no uncertain terms, that if anyone on this base so much as looks at her the wrong way again, they will answer directly to me." He then turned back to Anya. "You may not wear the trident on your chest, but you went deeper into the dark than any of them. Don't you ever forget that." "I haven't, sir," she replied. "Good." He exited the room without another word, leaving a stunned colonel and a silent private in his wake. By that afternoon, a silent transformation was complete. The dragonfly tattoo was no longer a mystery. It was a badge of honor more profound than any medal. When soldiers passed her now, they didn't whisper. They saluted. And Anya, the ghost they had once laughed at, finally had the one thing she truly wanted, to be left alone. At 0420 hours, 3 days later, the world ended in a silent flash. A high-altitude electromagnetic pulse detonated over the base, and Firebase Chimera was plunged into absolute darkness and silence. The generators died, the lights went out, and the comms network dissolved into a hiss of static. Every camera, sensor, and alarm was dead. It was a perfectly executed decapitation strike. In the ensuing chaos, only one small section of the base remained powered. The southernmost checkpoint, Echo Gate, running on an isolated, hardened circuit. And at that checkpoint stood Anya Petrova, her M4 rifle already shouldered. She hadn't flinched at the blackout. She hadn't reached for her dead earpiece. Instead, she had dropped to one knee, her eyes scanning the unnatural stillness of the desert beyond the fence. Her breathing was slow and even. Her movements were economical, stripped of all wasted motion. This was her world. The chaos was her home. Through her thermal scope, she saw them. Four figures, moving with liquid speed, detaching from the shadow of a low-hovering, radar-invisible helicopter. They were specters, leaving almost no trace as they ran towards the perimeter. No flags, no call signs. Professionals. Anya didn't wait for orders that would never come. She tapped the silent alarm on her belt. A direct line to the command bunker, wired to the same hardened circuit. Nothing. The line had been cut. She was alone. The first intruder reached the outer fence and sliced through the wires with hydraulic shears. Anya fired a single, suppressed shot. The figure dropped without a sound. 3 left. They scattered, instantly reacting, but she was already gone, melting into the concrete shadows of the barricades. A flashbang arced through the air. Anya had already turned her head and squeezed her eyes shut, counting the seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3. As the flash faded, she popped up from a new position. 2 more precise shots. One target spun and fell. The other crumpled behind a sandbagged emplacement. The last man, realizing the assault was compromised, bolted for the cover of a watchtower. He was fast, but Anya was faster. She vaulted the main barricade, her movements a blur of deadly efficiency. Not the clumsy run of an infantryman, but the fluid, ground-eating lope of a hunter. By the time the final intruder reached the base of the tower, she was already there, waiting in the darkness. "On your knees," she commanded, her voice a calm, lethal whisper. He spun, raising his weapon. He was too late. The muffled report of her sidearm was the last sound he ever heard. Minutes later, the base's emergency power finally kicked in. Armored vehicles roared to life, and squads of disoriented soldiers rushed towards the perimeter. Colonel Rostova and General Corbin, who had been delayed by the attack, were among the first to arrive at Echo Gate. They stopped cold, for bodies lay on the ground, neutralized with surgical precision. And standing over them was Anya, a dark smudge of blood on her sleeve. Not her own. She looked up as they approached, her rifle held at a low ready. "Report," Rostova barked, her voice tight with disbelief. "For hostiles," Anya said, her voice as calm as if she were reporting on inventory. "EMP drone disabled the northern grid. They landed here, undetected. All threats neutralized. Alone." General Corbin asked, his voice filled with awe. Anya nodded once. There was no time to wait. Corbin looked at the carnage, then back at the small, quiet woman standing in the middle of it. "You didn't just wait," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "You held the line." He looked at the dragonfly on her arm, now visible in the emergency lights. That sigil, it wasn't a memorial. It was a warning. The story of what happened at Echo Gate became the new legend of Firebase Chimera. Intel later confirmed the attackers were a rogue special forces unit testing vulnerabilities in U.S. defenses. They never expected to meet any resistance, let alone a one-woman kill team. Anya Petrova was offered medals, a promotion, a full and public reactivation of her NIC status. She refused it all. She asked only to remain where she was, at the edge of the base, a silent guardian watching the horizon. Now, they don't laugh at the dragonfly tattoo. They salute it. When new recruits see it, they don't whisper wannabe. They whisper, "That's Echo 7," and they'll tell you the sigil doesn't mark who she was. It marks who is still standing when everyone else is gone. If this story resonated with you, let us know what country you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more hidden legends from the front lines. What do you think was the real reason Project Nyx needed operatives like Anya to be ghosts? Drop your theories below, and always comment with respect for the service members who operate in the shadows.